What do you do when advisors get it wrong?
Hello and welcome to the Mark and Pete Show. We all take advice in life. In business, many of us turn to lawyers, consultants, and experts to help us through our business strategies. In life, we may turn to our parents, possibly friends, and in some cases, even the clergy. But what happens when it all goes wrong and advisors put us all in a sorry state? An advisor advises and analyzes, theorizes and then just summarizes and modernizes all types of enterprises. But when advice polarizes and surprises and means everyone downsizes and economizes, who recognizes the compromises and advises who apologizes? Oh, it can get awfully complicated. Clergyman
Seems
Pete,
like
I ask you, who do you turn to for advice?
Well, I try to turn to advice with people who know the subject area that I'm talking about. I mean, if you're going to look at from a lifestyle, living out your life from a religious Christian point of view, or from someone who just wants to see how can you live a good life, sort of thing, I would say that you need God's Spirit, and you need to pray, you need to ask God to give you His Spirit. The Bible teaches us about that, but it also has general instruction. Say if you're not a Christian, or you're looking for something not distinctively Christian about taking advice. The Bible does say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So it'd say, well, you begin with God, which is what I was just saying, but then you need to be able to take instruction from those who are wise. So it needs to be from someone who knows about the area that you're asking advice on. Proverbs 19 verse 20 says, listen to advice and accept instruction that you may gain wisdom in the future. So advice from people who know what they're talking about can help you gain wisdom, but it doesn't give you wisdom. So who do I go to? Well, I do pray and ask to be filled with the Spirit. I look to the Bible for advice on what God thinks. But when it comes to just asking advice, it depends. I ask people who know about the subject that I'm interested in, or that's important. For example, currently we're going through what's often labelled as a pandemic with the new coronavirus out and about. What I've looked at there, I've looked for people who look for advice from people who know the science to do with viruses. And so I wouldn't look, for example, just taking a person at random, to Boris Johnson for advice. So
Well,
just
come on,
saying.
Ed.
Anyway, that's why I think the basic principle, pretty obvious thing to say.
Yeah.
Take advice from people who know that area, not from people who set themselves up as advisors necessarily.
Well, I think that what we're trying to say here is that essentially there are experts in the market, wherever they are, that claim to offer the best advice.
Yeah,
But
very
how
true.
do you turn to it? Let's boil it all down. What we wanted to turn to is, as though we mentioned Boris Johnson, but he's had a little bit of a turbulent time when it comes to advisors. Now, his main advisor on keeping the United Kingdom together has actually left only after 2 weeks. Yes, Oliver Lewis, who, as an ally of the Prime Minister's former chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, lovely chap, as we all know, we like Dominic, don't we? But unfortunately has decided that he has a relationship which has been made untenable by others within Downing Street.
Yeah,
We'll probably
yeah,
get to the
that's
truth
what
of
he
this.
said, yeah,
But at the
yeah.
end of the day, 2 weeks tenure as an advisor clearly isn't great. And yet, when we look at politicians typically tend to have advisors, whether it be on economic strategy, it could be strategy on the pandemic, as we've seen unfold over the last year. Now, the fact of the matter is, somebody like Boris Johnson seems
Yeah.
to have an issue here with advisors, because he's cleared out a lot of advisors, turned them over, and he eats them for breakfast. So is it that he just can't take advice, or that he just doesn't know how to get the right advisor? So when we look at politicians, we'll come on to other stakeholders, business people, etc. Let's talk about Boris. Why is it that perhaps he struggles to take good advice? What's your thought there?
Well, my opinion, Mark, is there's a problem that he has. I don't think it's purely temperamental. There's a problem because there's a problem that many people have from the same background as him, in that they all have a certain way of thinking. Because if we just look at the people who are in the positions of power within politics in our country, they've all been mainly been to the same schools. They've been to the same university, and in fact done the same course at university, and now they're in these positions of power. They all know each other. They all sleep with each other. They have that certain certain cultural milieu in which they operate. They think, and all of them think they know best, or they take advice from people within that bubble. Yes. Now, for Boris Johnson, that means taking advice, it seems, from his girlfriend, but maybe also from other people. I mean, I know that there are other advisors who've been, or people in positions where they can give advice in Number 10 Downing Street, that is to say, in the Prime Minister's offices, who come from the same background as him, who know each other, are friends of his girlfriend or friends of his from the past. His problem is that he's in that closed bubble and he can't break out from it and take advice from elsewhere. I think that's the main thing that's making him struggle to take good advice. And people from outside of that don't last very long.
Well, indeed. Now, somebody who has lasted very long is somebody who I think is an entrepreneur, somebody who's made a lot of money and actually paved the way to very well-known brands. And I'm going to refer to this individual. It's Richard Branson. Now, one of the things that he talks about when it comes to advice, whether we like the type of businesses that he's pioneered over the years is a separate point. But the key thing when it comes to advice is that he always has emphasized, always take advice from somebody who knows something better than you. So typically, often business people do fall into the trap is that they just employ yes people, meaning that they take advice from people who will say yes, and it makes you feel all warm and cozy, and you're not really getting the value. So you always employ people who can do something better than you, i.e. give you the advice of what needs to be done for a particular role. The other thing as well, which is a separate point, is that in business you have different stakeholders. You have people at the executive level, management level, and a lower strata. People who are coming into industry will always need to learn. Now, when you take advice, sometimes it's very difficult to take advice from somebody who might be perceived to be more junior than you, and yet they can often be make quite the difference to you, because either they've got a specific latest knowledge because they've come out of college or university, or it could be that what you do is that in business you have what's called a mentor. Now, that mentor could be anybody. It doesn't have to be somebody who's a highly experienced, wealthy individual, although that could be the case. Essentially, in business, what you're looking for is somebody who can guide you, give you that honest advice that is in your interest. Now, my advice on this is that try and seek out those individuals. It's difficult because they are rare. And the reason I say this is that in your career, you will get a lot of advice, dare I say noise, which may seem on the surface to be the right thing to do, but actually really isn't in your interest. It could be either an ulterior motive on behalf of that stakeholder, or it could be that maybe they're just not particularly good advisors. The key here is to seek out your mentors. And it may not necessarily be somebody who is in your own company. It might be somebody you worked with in a previous company and you keep in touch. These are things that are quite important, because those individuals will give you honest advice and help you to assess the problem more effectively. So that's in business. And there are many other things that you can do to build up your network. So I think that one piece of advice that I would give is always try and keep those stakeholders who you value. And as I said, they don't necessarily have to be on the same level as you in the business strata. They could be more junior than you, or they could be much more senior. But always seek that advice, because actually by asking somebody, would you mentor me, is a good thing for them. it's actually not only a good thing for their kudos, it helps them. They feel as though they're contributing. Now, I want to move it on because, Clergyman Pete, I know that we've talked about politics and business, but people generally need to take advice in life. Now, typically, when we're growing up, we take advice, of course, from our parents, although many of us,
Sometimes.
I think, have had some angst over that, because as young people, like ourselves, we often grow
Indeed.
up and we try and learn. And have our say. We want to have a stakeholding. We want to see that we made the difference and we made the decision. But I want to ask you. I mean, you're a parent. What advice do you typically tend to give to your children and young people? Let's start at that level.
Yes, well, advice is difficult to give to young people, especially coming into their teens and early 20s. So there's only two ways to do it. Advice needs to be asked for. If it's something that you're giving and it's not asked for, it has to be an instruction. It has to be something. There's no point giving advice if it's not asked for. You've got to say it's going to be something they've got to do. If you're talking about advice, it needs to be asked for, it needs to be wanted. And so, if you encourage the fact that young people can give you advice as well, and it becomes a two-way process, that means that it can be wanted. And I think that's the way forward. That's the way. It can't always work, in a formal teaching environment. Sometimes it can. It depends on the setup, particularly with smaller classes. So it can be a large school with small classes. It can work. So that's what I'd say. How do you give advice? Well, by the way to be respected generally with young people, I find with in giving advice, is being also willing to take it. And you will know, I think, from a business setting as well, that's often the case as well. If your workforce believes that their management or their leadership will take advice from them, they'll take ideas from them how to make the product better, for example, then they're more likely to take advice the other way, and that breeds that results in a healthy environment for the company to grow and to be more flexible over time. It works better, and I think it's the same with young people, especially important in that case, because underneath what may be an arrogant exterior, most young people have some insecurities. So if you can show that you're trusting them to give advice, then it will work both ways.
Yes. Now, we've talked about the general principle of taking advice, etc. But in business, we often adopt advisors, analysts, and many people who guide us. Paid, exactly. Now, what happens when it goes wrong? Now, of course, this is where you have to ask yourself, ultimately, who is actually to blame? Is it the advisor? Well, you could say, perhaps maybe you could refer them to an ombudsman or an authority and say, this person is just giving rubbish advice. It was incorrect, or it was something that was wrong. Now, that obviously then you have to go to another, in business, you go to another advisor, which is a lawyer. And then you get into a very complex situation, as I sort of alluded to at the beginning of the program. But what do you do where you then maybe have to sort of sit back and think, well, ultimately, you took that advice. So is it really what we're saying here is that when you take advice, you also have to accept the responsibility of accepting that and implementing it. Now, in business, it's much clearer, because if you get wrong advice, there are legal mechanisms to perhaps safeguard yourself, or governing bodies. But what do you do, Clergyman Pete, in life if somebody guides you incorrectly? Now, that could be about your career, or, you shouldn't have gone out that night when really actually you should have done, and you missed all the social opportunities. It can be at quite extreme levels in society. But what do you do when somebody has guided you, somebody who you thought was a respect, whether it be a parent, a figure in the community, or somebody that you just respected, and it goes wrong? What's your guidance there?
Well, my guidance, and I think you can see that everyone should be able to see the wisdom is this: is if you're taking advice, you are still taking the decision, whatever it is. So when you take advice and you put it into practice, it's still your responsibility. You chose an advisor. Now, it could be that they make some mistake or they deliberately mislead you. That's in that case, of course, they are culpable in that case. But just talking generally, assuming that they haven't deliberately led you astray, it's just that the advice has gone wrong, that you've ended up with the wrong advice, then it's your responsibility. So if we take it back to politics and the policies over lockdown due to the coronavirus epidemic, then we can see that Boris Johnson, as Prime Minister, and the other ministers there, the health minister, for example, are making decisions on advice from the scientists. And the mistake here is I believe, is to put the scientists front and centre, as though they're making the decisions. They're advising the politicians. They're the ones who should be up front. I don't even know if you need to see the scientists. And so the responsibility lies on the people who are making the decisions. As soon as you muddy the waters like that, it makes it very difficult. So I think if advice goes wrong, you need to take the responsibility. But that can, of course, just as Boris Johnson has sacked one of his advisors recently, then of course it means dispensing with the advice if you think that he's not good enough. Taking away all the rumours as to why Boris Johnson dispensed with his advisor recently, I think that what you can say is, if the advice has been bad, then they need to go.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is, in this case, whether it was actually the advice that was bad, and this advisor left because the position that he'd been put in was, I think he put it as being untenable, talking about that, exactly. As you were saying. So that's the question. So that would be my main point is, advice is advice, but decisions are the things that you're judged on.
Well, there you go. Well, there's an excellent piece of advice.
Take my advice on that.
Listeners, what do you think? Should we listen to Boris Johnson or not? Keep reading the Bible, and definitely keep listening to the Mark and Pete Show. Why not log on to markandpete.com and let us know your thoughts. Well, we hope that you are getting good advice, particularly in these troubled times, and hopefully our advice is that things will get better, honestly. Join us again next time for more topical topics with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark.